Muy buenos días, tengan todas y todos ustedes.
Bom dia.
No sé si me escuchan bien.
Não sei se estão ouvindo bem.
Muy buenos días. Excelente.
Bom
Gracias.
dia.
Hacemos
Muito bem,
esto
obrigado.
que contamos con el servicio de interpretación para inglés,
Nós
portugués,
temos serviço de interpretação para espanhol, português, inglês. Então, só se quiserem utilizar a interpretação, é só clicar no globo. Então, a Organização Pan-Americana da Saúde e a Organização Mundial da Saúde estão realizando esse webinário como parte das atividades que o Departamento de Doenças Não Transmissíveis e Saúde Mental da OPAS está realizando na ocasião da 7ª Semana de Segurança Viária. Nós destacamos a necessidade que os governos e as sociedades repensemos juntos como nós planejamos sistemas de transporte, de trânsito para garantir mais sustentabilidade e segurança no sistema viário. Nós temos um programa muito interessante e planejado com a participação de autoridades dos diversos países da região que haverão de participar desse evento. Destaco que este webinário está sendo realizado em estreita coordenação com a Aliança para a Segurança Viária. Nós recebemos o apoio dos pontos focais dos escritórios da UPAS nos diversos países, aos quais nós agradecemos. Para iniciar essa atividade, contamos com a presença do Dr. Ansel Hennis, diretor do Departamento de Doenças Não Transmissíveis e Saúde Mental da Organização Pan-Americana de Saúde, está conosco para inaugurar a sessão e dar as boas-vindas. É um grande privilégio, prazer para mim estar aqui, autoridades, distinguidos membros dos parlamentos, representantes das organizações da sociedade civil, colegas. Bom dia e sejam todos bem-vindos a este seminário Repensando a Mobilidade na América Latina e no Caribe. Como ouviram, a Organização Pan-Americana da Saúde, em colaboração com os nossos colegas na Organização Mundial da Saúde e a Rede Parlamentar de Segurança Viária das Américas, como parte das atividades da 7ª Semana das Nações Unidas de Segurança Viária. Se precisarem de interpretação, podem escolher seu idioma clicando no globo na parte inferior da sua tela. Então, vamos falar sobre a necessidade urgente de todas as sociedades de modificar a forma que nós nos deslocamos, de forma que todo mundo esteja mais seguro. A maioria dos sistemas de transporte tem promovido os sistemas viários de transporte privado. O Plano Global para a segunda década de ação para a segurança viária, a mobilidade é uma parte consubstancial a todos os aspectos das nossas vidas diárias. A mobilidade, por si só, impulsionou mudança social positiva em tantas áreas, promovendo acesso igual à educação, saúde, trabalho e pode ter um impacto positivo na consecução dos objetivos de desenvolvimento sustentável em relação à pobreza, gênero e produção sustentável. No entanto, é preciso sempre colocar a segurança no âmago, no centro da mobilidade para garantir, na medida do possível, que ninguém sofra nenhuma lesão, sinistro, no tráfego. Precisamos redesenhar as ruas para as pessoas, a começar com aquelas pessoas que mais risco correm para sofrer lesões, crianças, adolescentes, pessoas com deficiências. Por favor, fechem os microfones abertos. Além do mais, precisamos facilitar facilitar a transferência das pessoas através dos diferentes modos de transporte, ônibus, bicicleta e assim por diante. Há cada vez mais evidência que indica que garantir O transporte seguro pode contribuir a fazer com que as pessoas se mantenham saudáveis. Caminhar e andar de bicicleta pode ter um impacto favorável sobre a saúde e o meio ambiente, reduzindo certas doenças pulmonares e outras doenças, reduzindo os níveis de poluição do ar. Quando os sistemas de transporte público são seguros, acessíveis, eficientes e sustentáveis, podem facilitar maior acesso ao trabalho, à educação e saúde e demais serviços, estimulando os investimentos, podem levar a maior equidade e sociedades mais prósperas e saudáveis. Em alguns países, nós observamos alguns exemplos disso na nossa própria região. Bons exemplos disso hoje serão vistos, vamos ver como os parlamentos, as autoridades, organizações da sociedade civil e ONGs especializadas já estão contribuindo a modalidades mais seguras e sustentáveis de transporte. Esperamos que este webinário encoraje que empreendamos trabalho no futuro para fortalecer esses meios de transporte. Então, bom dia e sejam todos bem-vindos. Muito obrigado.
Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Genis. Também temos...
Muito obrigado, Dr. Genis. Também nós contamos com a presença da doutora Nan Tran, quem é a pessoa responsável da Unidade de Segurança e Mobilidade da Organização Mundial da Saúde, quem agora vai se dirigir a nós. Bom dia, doutor. Muito obrigado, doutor. Muito obrigado, doutor Anselm Hennis, pelos comentários iniciais, que, a verdade, expressaram grande parte daquilo que eu queria dizer. Amigos, membros distinguidos dos governos, é um grande prazer e satisfação para mim participar desse webinário para deslanchar a Semana de Segurança Viária das Nações Unidas. A título pessoal, o tema dessa semana, desse seminário, é algo muito importante para mim, porque nós vimos impulsionando essas atividades há muito tempo. Se me permitirem, eu gostaria de aproveitar o momento para falar sobre por que isto é tão importante para mim. Como todos vão saber, em 2020, houve uma resolução da Assembleia Geral das Nações Unidas declarando a década de 2021 a 2040 a segunda década. Já tínhamos celebrado a primeira década de 2011 a 2020. Parte daquilo que nós aprendemos durante a primeira década de ação para a segurança viária e o que nós continuamos a aprender ao avançarmos na nova década, que, se bem reconhecemos a importância de concentrar-nos nas intervenções para aumentar a segurança, por exemplo, legislação, garantindo o uso seguro do sistema viário, estabelecimento de padrões de segurança, reconhecemos que a mobilidade e o transporte vem evoluindo e as tecnologias que estão sendo utilizadas hoje mudam as formas que nós nos deslocamos. Não basta que nós nos concentramos naquilo que nós consideramos ser intervenções para aumentar a segurança. Precisamos também pensar na mobilidade no futuro, nos modos de transporte que serão disponibilizados no futuro. E nisso é que existe uma grande oportunidade, vencer uma questão da nossa capacidade e desejo de repensarmos a mobilidade, afeiçoando a mobilidade de uma forma que, ao evoluir, se torne não só sustentável, mas também segura.
On rethinking mobility, because we really want to emphasize the point that making roads safer isn't just going to be achieved by road safety alone. It really requires the integration of safety within other policy actors, including, for example, environment, including transport and health. And it's only through this integrated approach whereby we consider the impact of health along with efficiency, along with the environmental impact of transport, that we will truly actually achieve a mobility that is safe, that is healthy, and that is sustainable. And I think that from my perspective, this represents a really big opportunity for countries in this region, for countries around the world to really advance and innovate. Because as we rethink mobility, this is a challenge not only for low and middle income countries, it's also a challenge for countries across the world. It is a challenge for the United States. It is a challenge for Europe. So it is really an opportunity and a challenge for all of you sitting around this virtual table to really think about how we can innovate and how we can actually reimagine mobility in a creative way to really ensure that it's safe. And so that's really why we have focused this theme on reimagine, rethinking mobility. And let me finally end with an anecdote. You know, we've often been asked at the World Health Organization, as I'm sure our colleagues in PAHO have been as well, whether or not we think that we will achieve the goal of a 50% reduction by the year 2030. And the answer that I give is quite simple. I think it's not a prediction that we're being asked to make because we cannot predict the future. I think the way we should think about that question is whether or not how we want to decide. So the answer to that question, in my view, is quite simple. If we decide today that we will achieve that target, we will. But it means that we have to commit the resources, we have to commit the energy to actually making it happen. So it's not really about a prediction of whether I think in the future we will achieve it. It is a statement and a reflection about what we decide today. And so I hope that today, in the course of this discussion about rethinking mobility, that we will also conclude that as we rethink and reshape mobility over the next decade, we will also ensure that we achieve the decade's goal of achieving a 50% reduction by the year 2030. And I think it is very much doable. And I think based on the experience that we are seeing across the world and the excitement and the commitment of countries that are actually committing to taking action, to changing mobility, I am quite certain that that goal will be realized. But it requires that we decide today. So I hope that you will join me in making that commitment today to reimagining mobility, to rethinking mobility in order for us to be able to achieve our global targets. Thank you very much. And I look forward to the rest of the webinar. Over to you, Ricardo.
Agradecemos mucho al Dr. Nan por sus palabras y por recordarnos.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nan, for reminding us about the decisions that are made today and the consequences that these are going to have in the future are fundamental. Thank you very much. So now let's move on to the agenda that includes various proposals, challenges that we're rethinking in terms of mobility, looking at how society travels. Now, looking at whether we have private or mass transit, and what are the burdens in terms of disease? What are the years of life lost as a result of the consequences of the current travel systems? To make sure that these systems and mobility become more sustainable. The role of parliaments is, of course, very obvious, and that's why we want to hear their reflections in this topic. So today, we have Senator Soledad Tamayo, who chairs the sixth committee of the Colombian Parliament on this topic, and we're going to offer the floor now to Senator Soledad Tamayo. Go ahead. Senator Tamayo, would you like to take the floor, please? Just, we can't hear you. Go ahead. Well, first of all, I'd like to just warmly welcome everyone. Good morning to everyone. And in particular, greetings to Dr. Anselm Genes, Director of the Non-Communicable Disease and Mental Health Division of the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Ibarra, who is involved in health-related legislation, and Dr. Nan Tran, who heads road safety at the WHO, Dr. Raimundo, and senators from Argentina, and all the representatives of the Parliamentary Network for Road Safety of Latin America, also the Global Alliance of NGOs, and all of our attendees. I don't want to get too involved in all of the greetings, but I'd like to thank you for kindly inviting me to this event and giving me the opportunity to discuss the situation in my own country as we debate this in our own Congress. It's an honor to be here with you as a guest of the Pan American Health Organization and as a member of the 6th Senate Committee. I would like to thank Dr. Ibarra, Dr. Gina Tambibi for her invitation to participate in this virtual seminar as we commemorate the UN Week for Road Safety, that of course will help us to and will serve to reflect on mobility in our communities and look at how we can learn from one another, listen to each other's experiences, drawing lessons from other Latin American countries as we focus on reducing this significant number of traffic deaths that have been recorded throughout our countries. So let me just begin by stating that according to the economic ECLAC, the injuries caused by traffic accidents constitute one of the major sources of deaths as well as injuries in our countries. In fact, it is the second leading cause of death because of road accidents. So in terms of road safety, I just want to point out that this has become a major priority for the well-being and development of our nations. And in addition to the institutional measures, we have in Colombia a Ministry of Transportation. We have an Office for Road Safety. We also have standards that are fairly extensive where we review and try to enforce. But with all of this structure, this institutional structure, which of course is important in our country, and I'm sure these are similar experiences that other countries share. But I think that beside all of this, the levels of cooperation between the national governments, the local jurisdictions, municipal governments, as well as the legislative branches of government, together, all of us have made progress in the design and implementation of policies and programs that are geared to support the prevention of road accidents, to improve highway and road infrastructure, to help regulate public transportation measures, as well as promoting safer driving and road conditions for both motorists and pedestrians. So in our country, the Ministry of Transportation, as I said, is one of the main authorities involved in enforcing and protecting road safety conditions. We have other agencies that support that organization. And of course, through these agencies, and in particular, the National Road Safety Authority, have given top priority. And because of that concern and priority, we have also tasked these authorities to work to reduce road accidents. So we have a national road safety plan that has been established, identifying specific objectives and strategies geared to reducing road accidents and improve road safety. We also have an National Road Safety Observatory that focuses on providing up-to-date statistics, data, in addition to managing the data and sharing information, processing the information. They also guide, they design, they monitor the progress made. So we use these evaluations to help craft and develop more up-to-date road safety measures. This is also a part of our development and especially local jurisdictional measures. We also have a series of standards, legislation that are upgraded constantly in order to adapt to the ever increasing needs and requirements of growing metropolitan areas and communities. We also have an integrated public transportation system. We have, for example, Bogota, our capital, that constantly seeks to improve road and transportation safety, security, and also provide alternatives in terms of urban transportation, constantly improving these services. And we have just formally approved, this current administration in Congress, we have formally approved the National Development Plan, which runs through 2026, with some specific guidelines aimed at implementing strategic public transportation measures with the aim of strengthening and structuring regional transportation systems, including new sustainable and levels of sustainability in transportation, in various modes of transportation that include some key ingredients, including initiatives that include river transportation, as well as streetcar and other modes of transportation, working with the government authorities who are running for election in October of this year. So we're right in the middle of an election cycle. We're going to have municipal elections, mayoral elections. So the development plans, of course, will have to be aligned. Of these local jurisdictions have to be aligned with the national development plans. Just to also point out that we are making efforts towards improving investments in construction projects that will provide for greater safety measures in the roadways to protect pedestrians and motorists. There's also a road safety awareness raising campaign to help teach citizens to respect the rules of the road. In fact, the road safety authorities, one of its main tasks is to help educate, raise awareness, including starting at the level of the primary schools, teaching people to respect cyclists, pedestrians, and modes of transportation that require more guarantees from the local and jurisdictional authorities. We also have to teach children in the home as to how to better respect traffic laws so that our children will be more receptive to many of these decisions, starting with the family. So in December, January, we have some statistics that I think are significant. I wanted to use this as a reference since they lead us to the understanding that policies need to continuously be improved and need to be addressed. Challenges need to be tackled with policies that are focused on reducing the high levels of accidents. So if you look at January to December of 2022, according to statistics compiled, we had 8,030 traffic accidents. And this a significant number of 8,000 deaths, which this is a red flag and a warning to our governments If we look at the number of men, the number of women, we find 6,500 men and 1,400 women died. So it means that the motorcycles, for example, are used mostly by men who travel to work and back. And these statistics state that there's a much more significant of traffic deaths among men. So it also shows us that there's an increase of about 23.9% of percentage of deaths compared with over the last 5 years. And this, again, should be a warning. And in 2022, we had the most significant number of traffic deaths, as I mentioned. And between January and April of 2023, according to the National Institute of Legal Medicine, we had 2,596 victims, which represents an increase, a significant increase of 5% vis-a-vis 2022 during the same time period. In other words, between January and April of 2022, which means that we're seeing an increase. Even though 2022 was as I said, the year with the highest traffic deaths in 5 years. So if we're still increasing even more, this is an alarming statistic. So there is a greater number of people that are using bicycles. There's a larger number of people using motorcycles, and in order to travel and as their main mode of transportation. Unfortunately, in Colombia, buying a motorcycle is the most easy transaction you could do. All you need is enough money. All you need is a national ID card. That's all that's required to purchase a motorcycle. There's no other requirement. In fact, even in the stores that sell motorcycles, all you need is, and in fact, this is one of the weaknesses, one of the greatest weaknesses that we have seen in and we as legislators, we need to be much stricter, much more demanding in terms of setting up greater requirements. When someone purchases a motorcycle, they should be required to take some driving classes. But people now can buy motorcycles very easily without these requirements.
So since we have realized the largest number of deaths is among those people who now have as their means of transportation the motorcycle, adults of over 60 years of age have become the most affected victims as pedestrians and cyclists. And as we have also observed, Colombia continues to have one of the death rates as a result of road accidents, which is one of the highest and of concern. This is why it is very important for us to continue to work in the implementation of those policies and measures that will enable us to reduce accidents. I believe that this is a quite alarming figure in Colombia, although it is true that people are listening from other countries as well. But we have a social problem, a serious issue of a political nature as well, which has to do with the presence of many organizations who are above the law, who give us headaches and establish alerts as regards the problems this country is confronting. But these figures that I have mentioned today are not too small, and they deserve our fullest attention and due alarm that we require, so that from the national administration as well as the territorial entities, we may focus all of our efforts in order to grapple regionally with these huge challenges and reduce the number of road accidents and deaths as well. There are great challenges, of course, as regards road safety. I believe that today we have to synchronize our work and to be able to listen to the experience that each one of us has had. I was saying earlier that the education of new generations as far as road safety is concerned is paramount. Sensitizing girls and teenagers so that there will be prevention efforts. Together with the Pan American Health Organization, as well as the World Health Organization, we ought to work together to summon up efforts and promote the utilization of road safety technologies, implementation of the new legislation, as well as the strengthening of the road culture in our countries as a need that we have to promote. Also to become committed to work in this exchange of knowledge and best practices internationally so that there will be mutual support among and between the countries. We ought to promote cooperation in each country and at the regional level through the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO. Among those solution options, we must recognize that our country, and especially some of our cities, have already been working in the Vision Zero initiative, Vision Zero. However, we must emphasize actions by the Ministry of Transportation on the national level. And I deem that what is actually happening in Colombia, for example, for every car registered in 2022, there are more than 3 motorcycles. In Colombia, in 2022, there were 18 million vehicles, of which 11 million are motorcycles. This is why there's very large number of accidents against motorcyclists, when the number of people affected in these occurrences also have to do, and primarily have to do with the utilization of the motorcycle. I see that you are wanting for me to finish. I don't know if my time is running out or we can continue to converse, but I think that we must continue promoting all these initiatives for the improvement of the situation and to regulate the utilization of the seatbelt, speed limits. How do we control? How are the people who drive, whether they're under the effect of alcohol or of drugs, under the influence? Therefore, all of this has to be considered so that there will be truly respect for those spaces only for cyclists. Today in Colombia, we have more than 500 kilometers of cycling roads, which allow us to guarantee cyclists that use the bicycles as a means of transportation, since the same economic situations have been conducive to people using other means because the costs are much too high in public transportation. But this also entails that there will be a larger number of road accidents, particularly in the capital cities of our states. Thank you very much, Senator Tamayo, for your message, which highlights the importance of emphasizing parliamentary work in the agencies in charge of road safety to potentiate a more sustainable mobility. We must not leave aside taking into account the importance that this has in our countries and support local work with that which is ever more effective in this context. Thank you so very much. It's a great honor for us to have the presence of Senator Mario Raimundo Fiat, Vice President of the Committee for Health of the Senate in Argentina, who ever since last year was elected as chairperson of the Parliamentary Network in Latin America for Road Safety for his great interest and leadership. Senator, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Senador.
Senator from Argentina.
No, no sé si es necesario desbloquear el micrófono.
Do you have to unmute your microphone for us to be able to hear you, or are you having any other technical issue?
Bueno, mientras resolvemos ese tema.
While we resolve this issue, perhaps we could continue on with our discussion from a different perspective, which is important, that of the coordinated road safety organizations, where we acknowledge that these organizations are the ones which deal with the tremendous challenge of promoting the sustainable mobility agenda, where there's a broad gamut of authors of different sectors are involved. So we have the President Maria del Carmen González del Porro, Executive Director of the National Agency of Traffic and Safety in Paraguay, who very kindly accepted to be with us this morning. So you have the microphone, ma'am. Maria del Carmen, you have the floor. Go ahead.
No, no le escuchamos, María.
We cannot hear you, Maria del Carmen. Your microphone is not open.
María del Carmen.
Maria del Carmen, are you there?
Desbloquear su micrófono.
Perhaps you ought to unmute your microphone because we cannot hear you.
Vamos a dar un momento para.
Let us allow a few more seconds to resolve whatever technical issue Maria del Carmen is having to deal with,
Para que nos comparta, pues,
so that she may share with us her viewpoints.
Seguimos sin escucharla, María.
We cannot hear you, Maria del Carmen. We still are not able to hear you.
Quizá para avanzar un poco.
Perhaps to continue on with our program, we could then
La palabra a la ingeniera Alejandra.
call on Ingeniera Alejandra Cedeño Villegas, Director for Mobility International Traffic in the Dominican Republic, so that she may share with us her experience. Go ahead, Alejandra. You have the floor. Hello, good morning. Great pleasure from the Dominican Republic and representation National Traffic and Transportation Institute. We're here on behalf of our Executive Director, Mr. Boveras, representing and participating in this very important week of the United Nations for Road Safety. Rethinking of mobility in Latin America, and especially in our case for the Dominican Republic. Along those lines, we have prepared a presentation to show you what we have been doing in order to bolster and to strengthen this new mobility scheme directed to sustainable efforts. And since we are having the presence of nationals and visitors, and we are trying to build up all of this effort, we'd like to thank you for the invitation. We'll start telling you that we have a legal framework established since 2017, structure according to the law that governs mobility, transportation, and road safety and traffic, which was part of the very strong framework that would enable us to take steps in the field that has to do with technical mobility, safer mobility. Within the context of our country, we're saying that at present, the main challenge we're grappling with is that we have a vehicular number of vehicles with an increase of 6%, with more than half of these are motorcycles, as you see on the screen. And the largest vehicular load are in Santo Domingo, 39%, and the city of Santiago. These are the main focus for mobility in our country, and the vehicular numbers have been considered for over 20 years. With regards to road safety, we can say that accidents to us are indeed another great challenge, since practically speaking, here in Latin America, we're the second in the region having the largest death rates per 100,000 inhabitants. Most of our accidents take place in the main highways, but we also have an average of more than 3,000 deaths per year. 84% of the death have to do with pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. Motorcyclists, number one, and then people who are overrun. We have a tool, which is a mobility plan for the main city in our country, in Santo Domingo, where we have more than 3 million trips per day. 42% of them take place in private transportation, 36% in public transportation, 9% of this is the massive transportation, and less than 1% take place or do it in bicycles. The rest is all pedestrians. Therefore, we have to strengthen the number of people who are pedestrians and other tools for this mobility within the integrated system. The emissions of CO2 account for 20% for the larger Santo Domingo region. The main focus of attention regarding mobility is prioritizing the public transportation system and to provide for these non-motorized displacements. This is why the main objective that we have before us and that you have been listening to about coordination of public transportation, moving from low capability and informal systems to a more formal system. We're doing this with support to the implementation of this new mobility scheme, with the support both of the AFD, the Inter-American Development Bank, in the different interventions. We do have a structured system of public transportation with different colors. You can see what is a massive transportation system, the system of buses, as well as the structural system of displacement of alternate lines, such as telepheric. So here we have the different modalities of transportation giving rise to a change. On the one hand, you have informal transportation, and we are strengthening and moving on to a more formal system, collectivizing public transportation. Currently, we have different axes that have been conceived under this modality. Formal corridors that give a better standard of living for the users, having ramps, of course, that handicapped people may have access to the transportation vehicles, including here everybody who's part of the formal system, considering the social impact that this corridor has.
parada que se han estado estableciendo para este
Here we have the
servicio.
model that has been established for this service, and we have included also electronic payment in the system, thus allowing the users to pay with a mobility card and also a banking card, possibly, to facilitate the integration of the system, the control and monitoring of all these units, so that we may see the quality of the entire operation that we have. So we have a ramp for a bus, and also the control and surveillance for complying along the roads and the use of informal units as well. In the promotion, we promote sensitization of drivers of these units so that they may indeed become aware about the ease they must have to handicap people in the system, promoting the utilization of the entire system with the use of electronic payment, promoting recycling machines, massive transportation, and promoting recycling, care of the environment, exchanging plastic bottles with mobility cards. Our comprehensive transportation system has metro lines, formal buses, high capacity, and also the telepheric lines. For less than a month, line 2 has been set in motion. We're increasing also the coverage of formal passengers in the system throughout these corridors, more than 90,000 passengers per day. By 2030, we're planning to increase by 70% the present coverage, and we have more than 39 kilometers for formalized transportation purposes. As I was saying, we're working in the main cities of the country with a scheme of mobility. This is for the city of Santo Domingo that I showed you earlier. We're structuring this also in the case of Santiago de los Caballeros with a monorail line, and also the informal operators who are structuring all these corridors so that they will be part of a feeder system and covering the whole spectrum without leaving aside school mobility. The Dominican government is implementing as well new modes of safe transportation to bring children to school, plus safe school environments with changes in the pedestrian areas and modifying the speed controls surrounding those areas. On a national level, we will be implementing an entire transportation system to guarantee the safety of children when going to school. At present, we have several pilot routes, but we're planning to have a coverage that will cover more than 2 million students nationwide. On the other hand, and as we said earlier, we're working in the infrastructure and the new scheme of transportation. We're implementing intervention in critical areas which have been identified as those that produce the most accidents. And we're working in different intersection crossroads with in order to have 300 safe intersections as part of this plan. Reducing the number of accidents that have been registered by the various institutions of the Road Safety Observatory, and also listening to the various voices of the citizenry and the people which are reporting these critical points and who conduct the evaluations to then conduct speed reducers and giving access to all pedestrians by inserting ramps for people that are handicapped. Also, we strengthen active mobility, which is another alternative for displacement part of the system, where as part of the active mobility, we consider the entire scheme where we use bicycle as a means of transportation. We do this from early education in schools and the various schools, having contests and the whole day devoted to this activity, such as June the 13th, which is the World Day for bicycling. We invite schools and work with them so that the children may participate, be it inside their facilities or outside it, to promote other school routes which might be of short length. These are some of the images that have to do with the steps we have been conducted to promote the utilization of bicycles, and in which children have participated in the various contests, even by making paintings regarding the utilization. We are promoting the cycling and pedestrian network. As a national authority, we work with all of the municipal authorities and civil society in the structuring of these work tools and the structuring of all these plans. So we see that we must strengthen for the use of this pedestrian and cycling network, working with the local authorities and the collective cyclist groups. From this network, we promote, we establish different activities to build up stronger tools like this one that we're going to be launching on June the 13th. A manual guide for the design and construction of cycling routes in the Dominican Republic and the implementation of the cycling routes, where we have provisional painting for now, but we will make them final with all these devices and facilities that will be made available throughout the country. The concrete actions to reduce all of these accidents, we prioritize massive transportation stations because these are the ones that generate greater pedestrian mobility. In the areas which are shown on these axes, we organize this series of day sessions with participation of civil society to include on the importance of respecting these pedestrian crossings, having a safe place for people to travel along. This has to do with the implementation of the new line of the Teleférico, which includes the students of one of our universities. We also dealt with the establishing of inclusion and accessibility in transportation, making the whole trip of these vulnerable users available, avoiding problems in the system to facilitate their transportation in order to reach their final destination. Here we have the support of specialists, but this is fed back to all of the actors in the system so that they may visualize and realize which improvements are required in order to continue allowing for the inclusion of all these design elements. This is a net also that shows all of the intervention in order to continue bolstering these steps, including on a permanent basis bicycle parking areas so that users may leave their bicycles and then use massive transportation. So in a very brief manner and with due respect with the time of other participants, we wish to thank you for all the support that PAHO has given us as regards the implementation of all these steps, and in order for us to be able to pursue and go on with all the road safety measures that we have. I thank you very much. Thank you, Alejandra, for this wonderful work that you have promoted from the Intram in the Dominican Republic, and to commend you for this progress made. And we wish that this will have a true impact against the high mortality rates in your country. We see with much pleasure that Senator Raimundo Fiat is now connected. Therefore, we will give him the floor as Vice Chairperson of the Committee for Health of the Argentinian Senate. Since last year, the President of the Parliamentary Network for Road Safety in the Americas. Senator, you have the floor, and we thank you very much. Go ahead. Thank you so very much. Good morning. Yes, we did have some technical issues. We had another link, and it seems I did not have the adequate link to be able to speak. So now we will give you some welcoming words, which was indeed my first purpose, to thank all of the PAHO WHO authorities who have shown so much effort in generating these working spaces by collaboration. And also to thank all of the participants in this meeting today. The issue of rethinking mobility of this worldwide week, the 7th week, which is also a week of the United Nations for Road Safety, commits us and invites us to work as regards the importance of alternate transportation means. Also the planning and development of all of our societies. The cities throughout the world are experiencing a tremendous explosion in the number of vehicles on roads. As traffic increases, the number of road occurrences also increases, where many people lose their lives or suffer lesions, serious lesions, especially in urban areas where vehicular flows are larger and the speed limits are higher than those which are usually recommended. The exponential increase in the number of vehicles results in an increase of these road occurrences, and this results in a deterioration of the objective of the second decade of action for road safety as promoted precisely by the United Nations, which is that of reducing at least to half the number of deaths and traffic injuries between 2021 and 2030. Perhaps I may be repeating some of the things that Ansel Hemes and Nam gave us earlier, who also alluded to this situation. The number of road accidents is a problem of public health which requires an interdisciplinary and intersectoral approach. Here in Argentina, this last Monday and Tuesday, we had the meeting of key members of the technical teams under the title Safe, Healthy and Sustainable Mobility, where throughout those 2 days, people pertaining to different ministerial areas, as well as various sectors of civil society, with the attendance of PAHO and WHO representatives as well, took up the main challenges within our country in order to be able to thus find the necessary tools that will contribute to the construction of safe, sustainable, and healthy mobility. But also, we dealt with advancement and achievements in our country in other areas. In this regard, I would like to highlight the work, indefatigable work carried out by the National Road Safety Agency, which is indeed a tremendous contribution, together, of course, with many of the ministries of road safety in each one of our provinces, and the one I represent, Jujuy, has a main role to play. I see that we also have connected with us Alejandro Marengo, who's the Road Safety Secretary in our province, who makes continuous contributions to the Federal Council for Road Safety, presided by the national agency.
And we know that one of the pillars that we need to look at in addressing the challenges has to do with standards and procedures. And I'm very pleased to report that in our country, during the first few days of May, the national law, legislation 27714, which for us represents a key advance, given the fact that traffic accidents are the main cause of death in people under the age of 25 in our country. 1 out of every 4 traffic accidents were the result of substance abuse, alcohol. So in our Department of Initiatives, and our audit department, we have launched a project that promotes the awareness raising, training, and also sensitivity training in terms of road safety. We believe that education plays a strategic part in creating a more responsible and society that reflects a spirit of solidarity and support for fellow citizens. That's why looking at the sustainable modes of transportation, we're looking at, for example, promoting the use of bicycles as an alternative mode of transportation. We know that other countries have had significant advances in developing new cycle roads and paths. And Also promoting the use of safety equipment, including helmets. We know the enormous advantages aligned with the use of bicycles, just as our previous speakers already indicated. These efforts not only contribute to a more healthy environment, but they also reflect significant direct benefits for health and well-being, reducing obesity, diabetes, as well as cardiovascular disease. Promoting these modes of transportation require our special attention so that we can review and look at how we can sustainably and structurally implement these measures so that alternative modes of transportation can be tools that support a more healthy community and also addressing vulnerabilities, because we believe that our citizens, our pedestrians need to be at the center of these measures. And the global plan for the second decade of road safety is going to require cooperative efforts in order to replicate in each one of our deliberating parliaments to address this, strengthen this network, the network for road safety among legislatures, to ensure that we can standardize many of these measures and health and high road safety standards so that they become a permanent part of all of our jurisdictions with the various dimensions that must be addressed. I've also indicated that at the end of these days, work days and events in Buenos Aires, and I just heard Dr. Nan Tram, who stated that he is fully convinced that we are going to achieve the 2030 goal stated. And I join in those words of enthusiasm and firm commitment. And I continue to, and will continue to support the PAHO and the WHO that I consider to be of vital importance. And I urge everyone else to join in these efforts. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator, and congratulations for that major landmark piece of legislation that I think will make a meaningful contribution in saving lives. And also, I want to thank you for all of your comments in describing the parliamentary network for road safety that really can serve as a catalyst in spurring on new measures. And we're sorry that our next speaker, we're having some technical issues, and hopefully once we're able to resolve those technical problems, then we will give our next speaker the floor. In the meantime, let's now move on, because we also want to hear the words of representatives from civil society as they promote and also support many of the road measures. I think their voice is more and more resounding, and I think it's also very positive. We need to take firm steps in order to ensure a greater and safer mobility. So now I'd like to offer the floor to Florencia Lambruschini, who is coordinator of the Latin American chapter for the partnership. We've had the opportunity to coordinate various efforts, including this webinar. So you have the floor, Florencia. Very pleased to have you with us. Well, thank you very much, Ricardo. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share with you the screen. Well, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be able to address you. I want to thank PAHO for having hosted this webinar as we commemorate the UN Week for Road Safety. I think this leads us to rethink again mobility in Latin America and the Caribbean, and I really feel this impacts on me personally, as Nan indicated at the beginning. So to begin with, the agenda and the content I'm going to cover includes some of the data relating to road accidents as well as some of the distribution of the modes in the region. I'm going to also share some examples in the region of protective measures that are being implemented to protect the pedestrians and cyclists. And I'm also going to discuss the role of the NGOs and discuss what we are promoting from the perspective of the NGO global network. So let's now begin. Most of you, of course, are already familiar with the content, but I still wanted to reiterate and show that 22% of traffic deaths are inflicted on, and the victims are pedestrians. So this is a report, the most recent report from the Americas, from Bajo. So we have a lot of challenges in terms of the victims who are most vulnerable users of the traffic system, the pedestrians. So now this chart, I know, is very busy. There's a lot of data, but the information is basically reflecting the modal distribution of 6 major metropolitan areas in Latin America. This is from a report that was issued by the IDB last year, and I recommend that you reference this. It's called the source is a report on transportation for inclusive development. If you look at the data from Sao Paulo, Montevideo, Buenos Aires, Santiago, and we look at the column reflecting the pedestrians, which is the first bar, but we also see the social strata. So we have 2 variables at play here that are very vulnerable. We have the distribution and the social strata. If we look at those who are pedestrians in the 6 major cities, we see there's a decreasing number. What does that mean? What does it mean? It means that as the social strata increases, then we see fewer people who walk. Something similar takes place with public transportation, but it's a little more concentrated in the vulnerable strata. And if we look at the use of private vehicles, that's light blue. The line is the exact opposite. This shows that the use of private vehicles increases as people's social standards and living standards increase. So what am I trying to prove with these statistics? Well, we've heard that the distribution pattern is usually very good, and we don't really need to change the modes. These modes of transportation, as we discussed it during the week, this Road Safety Week, as we rethink mobility. But what I'm trying to show here and respond to the following question: who are those who are people who are walking? Who are those, and what group do they belong to? Those that are using public transportation. So I really don't have the specific answers. What I have are questions, and I have specific reflections, and I invite you to also reflect and share your own perspectives on this. So looking at the distribution by modes of transportation, this is something that I ask you, and I'm sure civil society is asking this of governments. This distribution of modes of transportation, is it really this way? Is it safe, like we see in these pictures? Do we see it distributed like this in our infrastructure? Is it accessible for everyone? Is it inclusive in the context of including people with disabilities? Is it inclusive in terms of including women who are the main caretakers of children? Is it sustainable? Is this distribution and mode of transportation, is it safe? These are questions, and I don't have any specific responses, but I would just invite you to reflect on this, on all of these questions. So I have a few examples that I would like to include. For example, you have the legislation on mobility and road safety that was just passed in Mexico. And as the senator just talked about, the key role of parliaments in protecting vulnerable users of our transportation systems, to prioritize these vulnerable users, to ensure that this mobility is safer. So we do have examples from the region, very recent examples, as to how we can better protect through legislation and through procedures and rules, regulations. Mexico, for example, has gone even beyond this. It includes the pedestrians, women, and people with disabilities. Then they also look at public transportation. They have cargo transportation and automobiles and motorcycles, private vehicles. So with this example, and with what the senator already pointed out, I invite and I urge the members of parliament and legislators that we start prioritizing the vulnerable users of our transportation systems. So let's now look at the role that NGOs play in all of this. We actually have several roles and very encompassing and different ones, but this overarching plan includes a focus on our key roles. And as we notice in the Mexican example, a piece of legislation that has been completely inspired by civil society and promoted by civil society as well, has given us an example. And I think that's one of our key roles here. We need to inspire, we need to promote these measures. We need to serve as an independent voice that is a part of social change. I think that's where we need to play a role, and that's where we're going towards. So looking at the, for example, NGO network and in the Mexican chapter of the partnership, we've seen a lot of emphasis, just as we all are, in the accountability by governments. Accountability because we have seen many commitments, we have seen many national strategies and plans that include specific actions. We want to see interventions based on sound management with resources, with permanent budgets that will lead to outcomes and results that are meaningful in terms of reducing highway deaths and injuries. So in this direction, the partnership is focusing on developing new tools that will promote accountability. These are practical measures and tools that will help NGOs to be more systematic in ensuring accountability of governments who are the most responsible in legislating and reducing traffic deaths and injuries. This month, during the Global Summit of NGOs in El Salvador, we promoted and presented this accountability toolkit that hopes to basically focus in 3 calls to action. We're looking at measures, actions that are evidence-based, and ensure that the implementation include investments that are transparent, responsible, and to make sure that NGOs are a part of the decision-making processes. So these are ways for NGOs to ensure the accountability of governments. Our role as a partnership is to support these processes, working in unison with NGOs around the world. So the tool also promotes the dissemination of information, documents that are evidence-based, and looking at the various interventions where consultations take place with 300 members, and we promote a series of interventions, again, that are evidence-based to reduce road deaths and injuries. So the 5 key pillars of these pillars, 4 of them are related to changes in mode of transportation, and one is focused mainly on safety. We have, for example, the idea of fostering and creating 30-kilometer-an-hour zones, and then we're also looking at the next 3. And at the end, we also looked at promoting motorcycle helmet laws. So with this global week that we're commemorating, working with the NGO networks and partnerships, we are embarking on a path toward promoting an interactive mobility that is also safe and that protects the vulnerable users of these networks. So we want to thank all of you and for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Florencia, for the questions that I think really are encouraging all of us to and inspiring us to reflect on many of these things. So we're looking at the results, the specific results and outcomes. I know that this is going to inspire local efforts, and I think this will benefit everyone. So again, thank you very much. And now it's my honor to offer the floor to Claudia Abregasola, who has a long track record of working in transportation. She was director of health at the Center Ross for highway safety. This is an institution which, with the AHO organization, has maintained long-standing cooperation and working together. So go ahead, Claudia Adriasola. Thank you very much for those words of introduction. I'm very pleased to be able to join you today. I have really enjoyed the presentations that we've been listening to. I'm very pleased to see senators who are making these meaningful decisions and who are sharing the results with us. So I want to thank you, Senator Mayo, and others for joining us. So I'd like to now share my screen.
Muy bien. Si me confirmas, Ricardo. Bueno, estupendo. Entonces, repensando la movilidad.
So, as we rethink mobility in Latin America, today I'd like to discuss 3 key areas within my agenda. Looking at road safety around the world in Latin America, what do we need? What do we require to have? I'm going to be moving very quickly, but I want to just give you an idea as to what's going on in Latin America compared to the rest of the world. But we're also going to look at what are some of the requirements in order to achieve a more safe mobile system, and what's some of the progress that we've seen in the region. And I'm very pleased to having heard comments from the Dominican Republic about a plan that I consider to be pretty much perfect, that really defines clearly exactly what the road is ahead in rethinking mobility in Latin America. So road safety, and this is looking at it from a global perspective. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the content. Globally, we have 1,350,000 traffic deaths annually. We're going to have a new report next year, but I'm fearful that the new statistics, what they're going to show us, because after what happened with the pandemic, the statistics in terms of road injuries and deaths have really increased significantly. So if we look at the statistics, I think the one statistic that really pains me the most is to see that the traffic deaths are the #1 cause of death in children from 5 to 14 and adults from 15 to 29. This cannot be allowed to continue because it not only destroys their lives of children, but it also devastates families. So in Latin America, we've had 154,997 traffic deaths. 11%, that's 11% of all deaths in Latin America are attributed to this cause. And the death rate regionally caused by traffic accidents is 15.6 per 100,000 inhabitants. If we compare that to Europe, where we have countries like Sweden or the Netherlands, where it's 2 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants. So that means we have a lot of work ahead of us. In our region, traffic deaths are the second cause of deaths of young people between 15 and 29 years of age. And this is a very recent report from the OECD, and you can see that during the pandemic, we had a significant drop in traffic deaths, and then we saw it rebound, and it seemed to undo all of the efforts that we had made in 2018, 2019. So it's been a major rebound. And as we indicated earlier, we see how we compare to other countries. The statistics in some countries in our region are very high, very significant. So as we look at the death rates in Latin America, if we compare among the countries, the gray line is the most up to date. We have some countries where the figures have skyrocketed, and in others, a lower growth. So almost half of deaths caused by traffic accidents are usually the victims are vulnerable users, including pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. In Latin America, the problem has increased significantly after the pandemic, with the need to use transportation. And people were afraid of using mass transit, so many decided to get motorcycles. But also with the pressures of the demands, people did not want to go out to buy, so they would use apps. And so we've had a significant boom in the use of motorcycles. Countries that in the past had never really seen such a phenomenon, like Argentina, Mexico, Peru. So the numbers that we're looking at in Colombia, for example, in Cali, people now using a motorcycle, riding a motorcycle in Cali, it's 9 times more risky and dangerous than driving a vehicle. In Sao Paulo, each motorcycle trip is 32 times more hazardous or dangerous than riding in a car, and 356 times more dangerous than riding on a bus. So what do we need to do? We need to start looking at the problem from a motor transportation perspective. And within that, we need to look at what's going on with the use of or increased use of motorcycles. This group needs special attention and care. It's not a question of simply prohibit the use of motorcycles. These people need this mode of transportation in order to go to work. New jobs have been created, and countries in the region have to look at this. It's become a public health priority, and we need to look at this with a great deal of care. And we know that many people need to maintain this type of transportation. And also, if we look at the amount of investments that are channeled into transportation systems, they're very, very biased towards prioritizing private vehicles. So those investments reduce the possibility of improving public transportation systems and to be able to establish in cities networks and bike paths for more safe transportation. We also need to take into account another very important consideration. I'm referring to climate change, that we are the effects of which we are suffering in many of our countries and cities. It's a very, very clear threat. So one of the most significant flagship reports that we have seen on climate change refers to the need for transformational change to take place in transportation in order to reduce global warming by 1.5 degrees centigrade so that the world and that we can continue to be viable in our development. We need to change the way we view and the way we use modes of transportation. So what are some of the mobility systems and their impacts? Here we have the story of two different cities. They're very similar in terms of number of inhabitants, but look at the area that is under construction. Houston is 4 times larger than Madrid in terms of space. So we look at the fatality rate. It's 12.9 per 100,000 vehicles. And in Madrid, the fatality rate is 2.2 per 100,000. So the modal distribution, 91% of the population travels by car. In Madrid, 34% of the population uses public transportation. 36% can walk and use bike, and private transportation is 30%. So we have a much better balance, but that it was designed not just by ourselves. In terms of highway or road security, if we look at the number of motor vehicles and we see how we're developing our cities, this is essential. The research tells us that when people travel more, their risk for their now, if we look at car transportation, we're seeing something very similar to what Florencia was describing, that when economic salaries and standards increase, the number of people using private vehicles also increases. We see that very evident in many Latin American countries. In European countries, they've already been able to put the brakes on this. So you have taxes, very high taxes on private vehicle ownership and for driving in city centers. So this discourages people from having a private vehicle, privately owned vehicle. But at the same time, there's emphasis on providing better mass transportation systems and looking at alternatives such as walkways and bicycle paths.
In our region, pedestrians suffer a lot. They're very vulnerable. If we think in terms of climate change, it cannot be forgiven the people who die and who are producing the lowest amount of CO2 are the ones that are the most vulnerable, the most exposed. So this has to be reverted to have pedestrian crossings with a good frequency every 100 or every 200 meters. And there's where we see the largest amount of deaths. Those pedestrian crossings must have traffic lights. This is why I loved Alexandra telling us that precisely she's thinking of having some of these pedestrian crossings, which are most difficult, using traffic lights. The problem with the use of motorcycles became worse during the pandemic. You might have seen a piece of news dating back to 2020 in Lima, in Peru, where they said there was total lack of control. Every day, 1,100 motorcycles are being sold every day. It's a very large number of motorcycles. And the results in terms of occurrences show that congestion is the main reason of death in Lima, as well as in Mexico City and Guadalajara or Buenos Aires, because intrinsically speaking, the motorcycle is a vehicle that has and poses a very high risk. And human beings, our bodies have not been designed to be able to absorb kinetic energy as a result of speed. Therefore, our bodies have really no protection. When you're traveling 50 or 80 or 100 kilometers per hour, results will be terrible. I will have the motorcyclists at the group at greater risk, and after that, pedestrians, the greatest number of which are run over by motorcycles as well. Let us conclude with the automotive number of vehicles and the participation of motorcyclists. This dates back to 2017. Things have changed after the pandemic, and we see this in this very recent report of OECD-ITF, where motorcyclists represent indeed the largest groups. The use of private vehicles is something we saw coming during the pandemic. As a result of a survey that was carried out by Cambridge, and here we see that the wish of moving to a private vehicle was quite obvious and quite clear. However, we acknowledge that the safest way to move in the city is that. Here you have an example of the city of Guadalajara, in Mexico, where you see a comparison of how many people we may move with 2 traffic lines, 3,000 approximately. In the 1 bus line, we can move 5,000. So it is much more efficient. And as we go through the number of occurrences in these 2 lanes, we have more than 700 collisions, where there's along the bus line, if it is well designed, just 6. So you may realize that sustainable transportation is also that can give us very good and very positive results in terms of road safety. Here I move on to the role of non-motorized transportation. In other words, walking and the utilization of bicycles. As I have told you, these are a true treasure in our countries, where we still have a very important modal compartment, but we must protect people, and we must invest in this good modal where people are encouraged to walk or use bicycle, as Senator Tamayo told us, because the economic situation has become very critical, and there are more people who use bicycles. This is very good in terms of health. We have seen what has been the impact that this has had, and this can help us tremendously, not just to reduce the number of CO2 emissions, but also to see people who are much happier. And this has a very large economic impact. And I leave the information here for you so that you may review it, but this impinges on education, trade, and so on. So for us to be able to have greater safety, we must make certain that this group of bicyclists may increase. Here's an example in Copenhagen, where we see that there's a larger number of people using bicycles in the city. And this has resulted in that the numbers of fatalities and serious injuries may have gone down. How do we design these infrastructures? Basic. They want to do it for men or young men who have all this enthusiasm that we are not going to be making too much of invest. We see that here it varies from highly confident, which is 4 to 7, but we want to include women, children, and also bring in the elderly. Then the investment has to be much larger. So here I give you the link of our organization, which has made together with the Netherlands, with Denmark, and other countries where there is much experience as to how to design this resource for countries which are now working in this realm of endeavor. Here I give you an example of the safe, high-quality cycling infrastructure and the cycling roads. This is the bicycling. It's a very important investment in order to reduce CO2 emissions. Even more important than electrical vehicles. It doesn't mean that we should not have electrical vehicles, but cycling may even be greater progress and faster. What do we require in order to have a safe mobility system? So, here we see an approach to a safe system which involves many elements, principles, key elements, areas of action, and so on. I will just mention the principles today, because whenever we think in terms of this transportation scheme, we do not consider sometimes these principles. The results will then be very serious. First, that the people, we make mistakes, and then the systems have to be designed to be able to pardon our errors, that we're extremely vulnerable, as we said earlier, and the responsibility has to be shared, and that we must be proactive and not reactive. And this point I would like to highlight and emphasize upon it, because we know that people who die and are injured present a very clear situation, and we do not have to wait for a new problem to emerge or a new data analysis. We can deal with this right now. These are 6 cities where we must start acting. First, the design of our cities is paramount. We will require more cars, more motorcycles as time elapses, and the more infrastructure we have, we'll have to deal with speed. Countries that have speed limits of 50 or 60 kilometers per hour, these are good for a car, but not for people who needs to walk. So we must also be very careful in these elements. The networks for cycling, good access to public transportation for pedestrians, and so on. These are some of the recommendations that we have on which we have to focus in our countries in order to rethink our mobility. First, we have to plan our transportation in keeping with the access we have to this transportation. This is an example of Mexico City, where people who live in districts which are more central have 28 times greater possibility of going to their job in 30 minutes. So, why do we have so many motorcyclists? Because now we're getting people farther from the edges of the city. So they need the transportation. Secondly, the funding of mass transportation, which is very important. We cannot allow for there to be resources which are very scarce in our countries, and that these are just geared to speed or speeding issues. We have to emphasize public transportation that has an impact on road safety in general. The example of BRT in Latin America that has a 16% return for road safety. But let us not forget that this investment could be that of finding new solutions. This is an example of priorities that have been built back in 2021 in Nairobi, in Kenya, $120 million for this purpose. And the result of this conversion has resulted in the most dangerous road in the country, not just in the city, with 44 deaths in 2022. Whoever designed this was not careful about the investment that was made on this road. Let me conclude with an example from Victoria in Spain, where the mayor looked at the information for the city and realized that there was a very concerning evolution. And this is that people in the city used to walk a lot, and suddenly they stopped walking and there were more vehicles, more cars. And he did not allow for this problem to continue on, so he intervened and created a pact for sustainability, about which you will be here, what we call the super blocks, by changing spaces, public spaces for a greater use for pedestrians. He started changing, as a result of this, the way in which these public spaces were being used, opening spaces for pedestrians, as you see here on the right-hand side. He established a new public transportation network. He started realizing that public space was dedicated only for automobiles, for cars. That should be devoted to other means of transportation. Here you see the new means in which this road space has been distributed for different types of public transportation, cycling, and so on. We must prioritize also the use of vegetation, of plants, a city for the vehicle, for pedestrians, and also for healthy plants. We see, and an example that you have presented in the Dominican Republic a while ago is excellent, it's wonderful. But we see that in Bogota, we have been working with a special vehicular plan that's very good. We have the law for mobility and safety in Mexico, which the Constitution itself reports, and where great progress has been made. The National Vehicular Safety Plan in Brazil, which is very good. Tremendous achievements in Buenos Aires, as you know, with the more cycling pathways. In Chile, there was a mobilization also between 2018 and 2019 in all the cities, great changes, which are very important. So much remains to be done, but there's a lot that is already going on and which are extremely positive. With this, I wish to thank you for your attention, and thank you so very much. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you for the very important evidence you have shared with us as to how the modal behavior, especially with the use of motorcycles, is more risky for the population rather than other more sustainable means such as public transportation, and how to promote active mobility of the various demographic groups which are sensitive to this need and which have a potential of reducing risk from the population standpoint. We see with much pleasure that Maria del Carmen González Porro, Executive Director, National Agency for Traffic and Road Safety in Paraguay, has been able to connect herself. So Maria del Carmen, could we see whether we can listen to you now? Is your microphone working? Yes, thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me now? Yes. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you so very much. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you perfectly well. Continue on.
Ahora sí ya no le escuchamos.
Now we can't hear you. We were hearing you perfectly well. Now we can't hear you any longer.
Y nuevamente escuchamos.
¿Ahora?
Adelante.
Again,
Sí.
we hear you. Yes, we hear you now.
¿Me escuchan?
Yes, we hear you now.
Hola.
Yes, we hear you now.
Adelante, por favor.
Go ahead.
Sí, ¿no me escuchan? ¿No me
Can
están
you-
escuchando?
Yes, we hear you now.
¿No me escuchan?
We can hear you now.
¿Le escuchamos?
We can hear you now.
¿Nos escucha a nosotros?
I don't know, maybe you are not
Adelante.
being able to
Sí.
hear what we're saying. My apologies. I'm not in my country. I'm in Panama now, attending a forum, Intermediate Forum of Road Safety for Healthy, Safe, and Sustainable Mobility. So I don't have my technical team who take care of the entire system that enables us to communicate. So my deepest apologies for the technical issues that I have been encountering. You can hear me, right?
Hola.
Perfectamente.
Sí.
Muchas gracias.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Bueno, trataré de ser
I will
breve
try to be brief
por los problemas que estoy
because of these problems that I have been encountering. My apologies once
para
again.
decirles que
Just to let you know that in Paraguay, indeed, we're having
muchísimos avances en
much progress
segura.
with regard to safe mobility.
Escuché que no, lastimosamente no nombraban a
I
Paraguay.
heard that regrettably Paraguay was not mentioned earlier.
Nosotros hace unos días
But we do have launched a few days ago the National Road Safety Plan 2030,
armonizado con el plan
which is harmonized with the Decade of Action for Road Safety 2030.
es un trabajo que
It is indeed a piece of work that has required a lot of time because the setting up
en la conducta,
in the establishment and the behavior,
en la cultura
in the very culture,
de seguridad vial es
the idea of road safety is a very serious and costly problem,
imposible
and practically it is practically impossible to carry out from one day to the next. The National Transit and Road Safety Institution is a newly established organization. I'm the second part of the second administration group. So we are starting to work from scratch, from the very foundations. Takes a lot of effort, but I cannot fail to acknowledge that indeed we are having very good, very positive results, and we have done a lot. So, for us, for the agency and this administration, the fact that we have managed to carry out and conclude this national road safety plan is a tremendous achievement because it shows us the pathway to be followed and that the following administration should be following. You may say that a certain plan might die and disappear as others have disappeared unless there's follow-up and adequate and strict controls for this to work. Since I am familiar, I'm very familiar with people who have died. A 16-year-old girl who died in a traffic accident. So I feel this responsibility toward the association of relatives of road casualties in my country. This organization will be in charge of surveying the compliance with the plan, and I am certain that it has already started to fructify. The Victims Association is now starting to take care of this issue. I know that this will be possible because I'm familiar with the very heart of all the mothers that make up this association, and I can rest assured that this plan will indeed be successful. What else can I tell you? Of course, we have modified the law 5016, which governs road safety in Paraguay. We have modified it. We had a gap in the law in view of serious crimes because of driving under the influence. There were some mild or intermediate level faults, but the very serious ones were not considered. So we went through a procedure in Parliament, and we've had to go through many obstacles, but we have been able to identify these very serious violations, and now the law marks and shows directly and intervenes by way of the Attorney General's office. This is an achievement that we have managed to attain, and I am very happy indeed because of that situation. What else could I tell you? Well, I could say, for example, that at this point in time, the use of bicycles in Paraguay, particularly in the city of Asunción, is being installed as such. The municipality of Asunción, together with the UNDP, as well as other institutions, have built cycling pathways that crisscross the country and go to neighboring cities. And in listening to the presentations and submissions by our colleagues here today, we see that we have to be devoted all the way from our agency in order to bring about safety for the cyclists, because as a point of fact, we don't manage to do that unless we have a control and penalties for those who do not respect cyclists. We're going to have a much more serious problem with motorcyclists. So that's all I think I can tell you for now. To tell you about a problem, which also a very serious problem we have in Paraguay, which is the lack of public transportation to mobilize the large masses. In view of this lack of public transportation, precisely, we see that those who then must come to the capital city to come to work every day are compelled to buy motorcycles. And as a result of that, precisely, we're now having those horrendous statistics. They're highly regrettable. Also, in that field, we are promoting investment in public transportation. Paraguay nowadays is one of the countries in our region that has the largest power plants in the region and in the world. We are precisely working by way of technical working groups of the agency, which are devoted to emphasizing and also having people understand that public transportation, particularly electric mobility, is what is most advisable for the country and for the environment in general. We all know that. We also have solar energy. Very good solar energy. According to clinicians, this is good for the purpose of public transportation. And we have different working groups where we're looking at the possibilities and urging the various institutions to really and truly rethink the possibility of generating public transportation means moved by electricity, by power, and other systems that will be less polluting to the environment. With this, I think we would be resolving two very serious problems. Firstly, that we would have a decline in the number of motorcycles that are sold, and which constitute a true public health problem in our country. So I thank you so very much for these minutes that you have allowed me to speak. My apologies for all the problems and issues we had. This makes me a little nervous and anxious, and this is why maybe my mind has not been very clear. But anyway, I'm ready to provide you with any sort of information you may require to be expanded as a result of what I've said. So thank you so very much again. May you have a great day. And here we are all together trying to save lives so that a larger number of families will not go through that which we all who have lost a relative, particularly a child, have gone through. These are very difficult moments indeed, and which make us truly want to struggle and to strive in order to have a better world with lesser road violence. Thank you all. May you have a great day. Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Maria del Carmen. I fully agree with your last comments, and congratulations for the launching of the national plan and the follow-up that it will have from civil society to promote its successful implementation. To conclude with the golden brooch, we have requested authorities from 2 Latin American cities which have been outstanding for promoting safe and sustainable mobility to share with us their experience and the result of their work. We are certain this will be a matter of inspiration for all those of us who are participating in this meeting. We thank Ingeniero Antonio Ferreira Silva, Superintendent of the Municipal Authority in the city of Fortaleza in Brazil, for having accepted our invitation to participate. You have the floor, sir. Go ahead.
Bom dia a todos. É prazer estar aqui e já agradecer o convite.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I thank PAHO and the World Health Organization for this opportunity to talk a little bit about our experience in the city of Fortaleza, capital of the state of Ceará, the 5th largest capital in terms of population in Brazil, 2,700,000 inhabitants, 313 square kilometers in our city, 8,600 inhabitants per square kilometer. We have 1,200,000 vehicles, a large number of which are motorcycles. If I could please have my presentation put up on the screen.
Vocês estão me ouvindo?
Can you hear me? Can you see my presentation? Yes, we will put it up.
Obrigado.
Thank
Nosso
you.
tema, mobilidade urbana, experiência.
Now our topic, urban transportation, Fortaleza's experience, a new outlook on urban transportation, urban mobility.
Uma missão da Autarquia Municipal de Trânsito e Cidadania de Fortaleza, que é promover a mobilidade sustentável e garantir.
The Transportation Department seeks to promote sustainable mobility and to ensure road safety, offering inclusive, innovative services that place people front and center to save lives. We seek to become a world point of reference in public policy to protect lives in traffic by 2025. This is a commitment that we have taken on vis-a-vis our citizenry with ethics, transparency, and actions, respecting diversity, effectiveness, innovation, again, always protecting our population. Now, our commitment is to prioritize road safety in our city. That's our mayor's goal. We have to invest in improving the technical wherewithal of our international and local, working with our local and international advisors, adopting and adapting rather knowledge and policies to our local context, to make broad use of data and statistics, and to place an emphasis on different communication activities, engaging society, showing a commitment vis-a-vis society, and making use of pilot projects that then we can scale up. And so we believe that these pillars, to believe, to prove, to measure, and so forth, will help us achieve this goal. So we have a legal framework with the urban mobility law that sets forth a pyramid. This is a new paradigm of urban transportation with the focus on people. First, we have this inverted pyramid, people who move pedestrians, and then trains and public transportation, then commercial freight vehicles and personal vehicles, including motos. So we have inverted this pyramid in 2022 with a 57% reduction in road accident-related fatalities, victims, data management is very important. And what you see here is a page that gives you an idea of what our webpage of transportation data looks like. We've got the traffic safety plan, road safety plan. You can see maps. Data management is a key aspect for road safety in our city. We are expanding the bike trails in our city. Currently, we have 419 kilometers of bike trails. A new law in 2014 set up the master plan for bike lanes. We only had 78 kilometers at the time, 2014, and now, as I said, we have reached 419 kilometers of this network of bike lanes. We hope to reach 500 between all of the bike lanes, shared lanes, crossing lanes for bikes. We have a bike share program with many stations where you can pick up your bike. Now, there is a single transportation card that people use that enables them to use bicycles free of charge for up to an hour and a half each time. In 2019, we conducted some research, door-to-door research, and we saw that 6% of transportation was done by bicycle. 400,000 trips per year are made by bicycle. Before 2013, that was only 2% of all trips made by bicycle. Now, given the new urban design and safe roadway plan, we have created exclusive lanes for buses. We only had 3.3 prioritized lanes for buses. Now we have 7.9 kilometers of exclusive lanes for buses and other forms of collective transportation. These are corridors and exclusive lanes. Now, in 2013, we only had an average speed of 12 kilometers per hour. Now, per kilometer rather. Now the speed has nearly doubled owing to the exclusive lanes. Now, under this new urban and design, safe roadway sign, we also are intervening in the areas of schools by reducing the flow of traffic and increasing signage to ensure that there are safer spaces, walkways for children as they go to school. These are low-cost, high-impact projects which seek to improve these degraded areas for greater safety for children close to school. Again, according to this design, road safety in Fortaleza under this program has been creating calm areas with wider and safer sidewalks, crosswalks, facilitating, making it easier for people in a wheelchair to cross the street and safe crosswalks. We have 50 different areas, main roadways in Fortaleza, whose speed limit has been reduced, and that has brought with it a 57% drop in fatal accidents. We know that reducing speed from 70 kilometers per hour to 50 kilometers per hour has proven to be very effective. In fact, a study was done comparing a number of roadways in which the speed was dropped 20 kilometers per hour. And we saw that where that speed limit was dropped, we had a 68% drop in accidents. Now, this makes it more likely for a pedestrian who is hit by a car to actually survive more often. That just with a 6 kilometer per hour reduction. 10 other roadways have been chosen for a speed limit drop. We will ultimately have more than 60 main arteries, roadways, bringing speed from 50 down to 50 kilometers per hour. Enforcement. It's very important to enforce these new laws, to impress upon people their importance. We also offer training for responsible and safe driving. We do this at an early age in schools so that we can raise awareness. We have also invested in outreach, communication efforts to address risk factors, especially geared toward the most vulnerable people, pedestrians, people who ride on motorbikes. We have our road safety plan. The city of Fortaleza is a pioneer. Law 11,270 of June of 22. This is a plan based on our concept of safe roadways, safe systems. The pillars undergirding this, safe user, sustainable transportation, a network for offering care to victims of accidents. And here we can see the results. We've had 8 years running of a drop in deaths in traffic. Went from 15.5, and now we're down to 6 deaths per 100,000. That's a 57% drop in fatalities between 2011 and 2022. Fortaleza had reached the goal of the first decade, and now the mayor has pledged to reduce by 50% more the number of fatalities in road accidents during the second decade of road safety. We had 372 deaths, and now 15 per 100,000. Rather, that's what it was, and now it's dropped down to a fatality rate of 6 deaths per 100,000 from 2011 till now. Here's an example of the new urban design that is people-focused. This is Viracema in the cultural center of the city. Cars used to circulate here. This is a new project that places a priority on pedestrians. So you see more people out in the street, and they are much safer now. And so I thank the Pan American Health Organization, the World Health Organization, and we stand by for any questions you may have.
Muchísimas gracias, ingeniero Ferreira, por resaltar la importancia de hacer trabajo de inteligencia.
Obrigado, engenheiro, por enfatizar o trabalho de inteligência usado
the need of
dados
using local
locais
data and smart systems in order to develop new modes of sustainable transport. And it's been a very successful example. Congratulations for all of the progress that Fortaleza has seen. And now let's move on to another success story from the city of Buenos Aires, Argentina. Let's offer the floor to Matias Caldera, who is Chief of Staff of the Design and Implementation Office of Public Works. Matias, the floor is yours.
Bom dia a todos, obrigado. Aproveito a agradecer o convite para compartilhar experiências. Vou compartilhar a minha tela.
Okay, you can see it now.
Estão vendo bem?
First of all, to tell you that the purpose of our office is to design projects for the
projetos para poder ter essa segurança vial com prática saudável, melhorar a qualidade de vida das habitantes da cidade. Em 2020 foi um ano atípico. A circulação chegou aos níveis mais baixos em todos os meios de transporte, mudamos nossos hábitos e descobrimos e nos conectamos com a cidade de outra forma e começamos a repensar a mobilidade, o desafio foi transformar a rua num lugar mais justo, mais seguro, sem ameaças, reduzindo os acidentes. Sabemos que nenhuma morte ou lesão grave é aceitável. Em 2019, demos um grande passo, alcançando o objetivo de reduzir em 30% as vítimas fatais por acidentes viários. Isso nos animou a continuar com o segundo plano de segurança viária em 2020 e 2023, com 4 eixos: infraestrutura segura, fiscalização e veículos seguros, comunicação, educação, capacitação dos usuários e compromisso e participação da cidadania. E vou falar das ações principais que realizamos esses anos em cada um desses eixos. E no plano, a meta meta é reduzir em 50% as vítimas fatais por acidentes viários até 2030, uma meta de meio termo, reduzindo em 20% as vítimas fatais até o ano 2023. Começo agora a falar das ações dos diferentes eixos. Na infraestrutura segura, continuamos com a expansão da rede de metro ônibus da cidade. Novos 2 quilômetros foram incorporados, 21 linhas de ônibus, 14 intersecções, 250 mil passageiros foram beneficiados diariamente. Foi inaugurado na terça-feira dessa semana, foi quando habilitamos o novo corredor. Também intervenções de segurança viária e centro de transbordo da cidade. Começamos com a Constituição e Sães, incorporando novos caminhos, novos elevados, redução de velocidade, mais espaço de pavimento, de calçada, para esperar o transporte público, reconfiguração dos cruzamentos. Isso foram de custo baixo, grande impacto. Isso nos animou a continuar e agora estamos trabalhando em outros centros de transbordo com diferentes medidas. Em termos de ciclovias, superamos os 300 quilômetros de rede protegida, concluímos a primeira rua compartilhada, a Avenida do Libertador. A avenida foi redesenhada para todos os usuários das diferentes modalidades. Vejam aqui a ciclovia, que é bem larga e segura para a família inteira, e também incorporamos novas tipologias de solução de projetos adaptadas aos diferentes contextos. Também realizamos reconfiguração de cruzamentos na rede de trânsito pesado, as ruas onde há circulação de caminhões grandes, já reconfiguramos 40 e estamos incorporando novos semáforos com ilhas de apoio para os pedestres, para oferecer segurança, sinalização vertical e também uma nova marcação que é uma linha vermelha, aonde aí não podem parar os veículos pesados para eliminar o ponto cego do chofer do caminhão quando há um cruzamento para pedestres. Agora, veículos seguros em termos de álcool, 187% mais de controles realizados de 2016 a novembro de 2022 e mais de 4.774 carteiras de motoristas foram retiradas em 2022. Novo sistema de fiscalização eletrônica com câmeras que fiscalizam comportamentos de risco, utilizando o celular para quem está dirigindo, falta de cinto de segurança, viradas proibidas, excesso de velocidade, atravessar a luz vermelha. 135 câmeras foram renovadas, 73 novas câmeras foram incluídas, com 208 pontos de controle e também controles móveis. Em termos de motos, em 2022, tem 1.000 controles, mais de 5.500 carteiras foram retiradas, postos de controles na entrada à cidade, nas estradas, nas avenidas, e também fiscalizando o uso do capacete e que a documentação estivesse adequada. Também no eixo de comunicação, educação e capacitação do usuário, ano passado, mudou o exame para renovar a carteira. Agora o exame, em vez de ser no circuito fechado, a prova é feita na rua, condições reais, e 100% das carteiras são feitas com esse novo tipo de prova. Também aumentamos o número de perguntas da prova teórica. passando de 30 a 40 a exigência para passar. Também implementando o programa de motoristas líderes, treinamos os motoristas do transporte de passageiros, segurança vial, já fizemos mais de 1.000 treinamentos, experiências onde muda o papel entre o chofer, motorista e o ciclista, e agora também estamos trabalhando com empresas de logística em convivência viária. Temos agora um parque viário infantil, uma prática educacional, um trajeto pedagógico onde as crianças podem aprender, e o programa Se Solte ensina a andar em bicicleta a crianças e adultos. Temos também educação nas escolas, prevenção diária, jornadas de prevenção diárias. Compromisso e participação do cidadão, compromisso de alcançar as normas internacionais, melhoras metodológicas, na coleta de dados de vítimas fatais em 30 dias e também estudos observacionais. Melhoramos a coleta de dados, os comportamentos observados e também conscientização dos usuários do setor privado em veículos e motos, por exemplo, concessionários seguros. Treinamos aos vendedores em segurança vial para que, quando vendem uma moto, tenham toda a informação necessária e clínicas para dirigir com segurança, ensinando a dirigir de maneira segura. Novos desafios e aprendizagem para o resto do ano, para o futuro. Estamos trabalhando para melhorar os dados de lesões graves. É mais difícil conseguir esses dados. Trabalhamos também para melhorar a análise por usuário de vias com as motos, novo plano incorporando nova carteira para dirigir e fiscalização nas estradas, um orçamento específico para cruzamentos perigosos que vamos usar para os 40 cruzamentos que eu mencionei antes, e vamos trabalhar também num projeto de drogas e vamos rever a legislação de outros países e cidades para harmonizar e detectar oportunidades para trabalhar nessa linha. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado, Matias, por compartilhar estes avanços e para que vejamos que as melhorias em Buenos Aires têm custo baixo, mas alto impacto na segurança. Assim, quero agradecer a todos e todas e aos colegas que participaram nessa reunião, que nos deixou muitos ensinos, e vamos continuar trabalhando conjuntamente para ter uma mobilidade mais segura, saudável, econômica, eficiente, promovendo multimodalidade, inclusiva, sustentável e equitativa. Pelo que vimos, podemos fazê-lo e esperamos conhecer cada vez mais outros exemplos na América Latina no sentido de avançar nesse assunto tão importante. Contem com o apoio dos escritórios da OPA nos países e com prazer os acompanharão nos seguintes passos. Fica claro para nós que ao somar esforços avançamos melhor. Obrigado pela atenção e tenha um excelente resto do dia. Obrigado.
Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
La OPS por la primera vez se acercó a un gobierno local en Estados Unidos, que el gobierno de la zona...
A OPAS falou com o governo da área metropolitana e governos locais de Washington para conhecer ações, estratégias, planos urbanos e redesenho urbano em projetos feitos. A visão é uma iniciativa com 0 mortes e até 2024 queremos eliminar as fatalidades no trânsito. Eu estou andando de bicicleta desde os anos 90 e o que me motivou ao ciclismo na cidade e no subúrbio é a combinação de chegar ao trabalho tendo feito exercício transportativa em Arlington. Temos Walk Arlington, Bike Share, e nós gerimos o programa com o objetivo de reduzir o número de veículos de ocupação única. Eu uso a bicicleta para ir ao trabalho e para ir a todos os lugares. Esses meios de transportes foram sustentáveis, foram escolhidos para melhorar o meio ambiente, ter uma vida mais saudável e para também poupar dinheiro. Capital Bike Share é transporte público, ajudando as pessoas a andar pela cidade congestionada em bicicleta. Foi fundado em 2010, com 100 estações, 1.000 bicicletas, e já agora temos 480 estações. Um dos principais caminhos para ir a OPAS era um caminho chamado North Capital, com muito trânsito, compartilhamos a estrada, e eu tinha medo. Esses modos de transporte é importante porque se a estrada não fosse larga o suficiente, não seria conveniente. Então, agora temos grandes benefícios com essas ciclovias. Eu vim para Washington para poder vir trabalhar de bicicleta. Minha filha era pequena, eu podia pegá-la na escola a tempo. Tivemos sucesso na última década. Aqui em Washington, temos desde 6 milhas de ciclovias a 70, 80. A estratégia mais importante é que o plano está baseado no desenho das estradas com características, as características que não são seguras são consertadas. Lançamos também um app para compartilhar bicicletas, as pessoas podem entrar nesse app e usá-lo para alugar a bicicleta durante um mês, durante um ano, e é barato, é rápido, fácil, e a manutenção do transporte também é fácil, e não tenho que me preocupar com esse seguro.
Arlington, Walk Arlington, in particular, focus on the education and encouragement aspect of transportation demand management. So we do everything from create bicycle and walking maps that we distribute, reflective clothing for this time of year. We also have very robust online resources, from websites to social media campaigns, to all kinds of things to put out all the information that people need. Cabby Fiestas is a program that we go into the communities where we know that there's going to be a lot of Latino residents, and you particularly target them. We've worked with different organizations such as Carlos Rosario Public Charter School, which serves a vast population of Latinos in the Columbia Heights area.
Trabajamos también en hermanamiento con las bike shares, compartiendo las bicicletas. Se ha incrementado 25 estaciones más alrededor de la ciudad para que todos tengan acceso a las bicicletas.
We made sure that we have language on the stations, both in English and Spanish. The American Community Survey and ask people all over the country lots of different things, and one of them is about how you get to work. DC in 2016 had the second highest rate of bike commuting. Portland, Oregon, which we're pretty proud of.
el trabajo de identificar los actores locales, identificar las estrategias y iniciativas para promover un transporte más activo y de rediseñar la ciudad para que sea más segura para un transporte más activo en la zona metropolitana de Washington, es un trabajo que nos va a permitir OBS a inspirar otras ciudades y otras municipalidades, no solo en Estados Unidos, pero en otros países de la región.
But looking at all of your programs to find out how you can make it easy for your residents and your commuters and your visitors to adopt it. So you kind of have to take a holistic view of how are we going to get people to do this and not just say, well, if we throw down a couple of bike lanes, then that will be addressing the problem. It has to be easy for people or they're just simply not going to do it.